My aunt sent a picture of my old apartment in the family chat with caption, "The black sheep's box." Everyone laughed. I didn't. But she stopped laughing when I sent a picture of her foreclosure notice. I'm not usually one for drama, but sometimes life pushes you to a breaking point where you realize that being the bigger person has gotten you absolutely nowhere. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my Aunt Linda learned that the family's so-called black sheep had sharper teeth than she ever imagined. Let me paint you a picture of my family dynamics first. The Hendersons are what you'd call a typical middle-class American family from Ohio, at least on the surface. My dad, Michael, is the youngest of 4 siblings, and somehow that automatically made me the odd one out from day one. My cousins were all cookie-cutter perfect. Jessica was valedictorian and went to law school. Marcus played football and became a successful insurance broker, and little Emma was the family princess who could do no wrong even when she wrapped her car around a telephone pole at 17. Then there was me. Sarah Henderson, the girl who dropped out of college after 2 years because I couldn't afford to continue, worked 3 jobs to pay rent on a studio apartment that was barely bigger than most people's closets, and had the audacity to suggest that maybe family gatherings didn't need to revolve around whose accomplishments were most impressive. My Aunt Linda was the worst of them all. She was my dad's older sister, married to Uncle Robert, who owned a moderately successful plumbing business. They lived in a nice 4-bedroom house in the suburbs, drove matching SUVs, and never let anyone forget how well they were doing. Linda had this way of making backhanded comments that sounded almost supportive until you really thought about them. "Oh, Sarah, you look so much healthier now that you're working so much," or "It's so brave of you to live in that cozy little place downtown." The apartment she was referring to was a 400-square-foot studio in what used to be a decent neighborhood before the city decided to rezone half of it for commercial use. The building was old, the walls were thin, and yes, it was small. But it was mine. I paid for every square inch of it with money I earned bartending at Murphy's Pub until 3 in the morning, cleaning offices before dawn, and doing freelance graphic design work whenever I could find it. I was proud of that little apartment. It wasn't much, but I'd furnished it entirely from thrift stores and yard sales, painted the walls myself, and turned it into something that felt like home. Sure, my bed was a futon that doubled as a couch and my kitchen was basically a hot plate and a mini fridge, but I was independent. Nobody could take that away from me, or so I thought. The family group chat was Linda's brainchild, naturally. She'd set it up 2 years ago as a way for everyone to stay connected and share family updates. In reality, it was her personal broadcasting system for showing off her perfect life and making subtle digs at anyone who didn't measure up to her standards. The photo arrived on a Tuesday morning at 7:47 a.m. I was getting ready for my day shift at the coffee shop when my phone buzzed with a notification. There it was, a picture of my old apartment building, clearly taken from the street, with a caption, "The black sheep's box," and 3 crying laughing emojis. My stomach dropped. I hadn't lived there in 18 months, not since I'd finally saved enough to move to a slightly larger place across town. But Linda had obviously gone out of her way to drive downtown and take this photo just to humiliate me in front of the entire family. The responses started rolling in immediately. Jessica, "OMG Linda, you're so bad," smiley face emoji. Uncle Robert, "Looks about right for someone who thinks they're too good for family advice." Marcus, "Hey, at least she's not living with mom and dad anymore, right?" Emma, "Wait, Sarah actually lived there? I thought you were joking." My dad, to his credit, didn't respond. But he didn't defend me either, which somehow felt worse. I stared at my phone, reading and rereading the messages as more family members chimed in with their own jokes and laughing emojis. My hands were shaking. This wasn't just a casual joke, this was a calculated attack designed to humiliate me and remind everyone of my place in the family hierarchy. But here's the thing about being the black sheep: you develop survival skills. You learn to notice things. You pay attention when others are too busy laughing to watch their backs. And I had noticed something very interesting about Aunt Linda's financial situation. See, when you work multiple jobs and live paycheck to paycheck, you become intimately familiar with the signs of financial distress. You recognize the look of someone juggling bills, the careful way they phrase things when money is tight, the slight panic in their eyes when unexpected expenses come up. Linda had been showing these signs for months, maybe longer. She'd stopped posting photos of expensive dinners out. Uncle Robert's plumbing business had been struggling since the new Home Depot opened up and started undercutting local contractors. I'd overheard whispered conversations at family gatherings about temporary setbacks and restructuring debt. But more importantly, I had information that would change everything. You see, my current job wasn't just at any coffee shop. I worked at Cornerstone Cafe, which was located across the street from Henderson and Associates law firm, no relation to our family, just an unfortunate coincidence. Several attorneys from the firm were regulars, and I developed a professional relationship with them over the past 10 months I'd been working there. James Mitchell was a real estate attorney who handled foreclosures and bankruptcies. He ordered the same double espresso every morning at exactly 8:15 a.m. We developed a friendly rapport over our shared hatred of early mornings and mutual appreciation for properly pulled espresso shots. About 6 weeks before Linda's cruel group chat message, James had mentioned something during our usual morning small talk that caught my attention. He'd been handling several foreclosure cases recently, not unusual, given the economic climate, but he'd mentioned one case in particular that had him working late nights because the homeowners kept missing deadlines and court dates. "It's frustrating," he'd said, stirring his espresso. "This couple on Maple Street has had multiple opportunities to work out a payment plan or negotiate with the bank, but they keep ignoring the notices. Now they're facing auction, and they're acting like it's some kind of surprise." Maple Street? The same street where Linda and Robert lived. I'd filed that information away without thinking much of it at the time. But now, staring at Linda's humiliating message, I remembered every detail of that conversation. The next morning, I made James his usual double espresso and approached his table with calculated casualness. "Hey James, that foreclosure case you mentioned a few weeks back? The one on Maple Street where the homeowners kept missing deadlines?" He looked up from his newspaper, slightly puzzled. "Yeah, what about it? Would that happen to involve Robert and Linda Hendricks at 1247 Maple Street?" James paused, clearly weighing professional discretion against the fact that foreclosure proceedings were matters of public record. "Sarah, I can't discuss specific client details, but..." He pulled out his phone and navigated to the county clerk's website. Foreclosure notices are published publicly once they reach a certain stage. If you're curious about a specific property, you can look it up yourself. It's all right here on the county's website. I thanked him and spent my break researching. The county clerk's website was surprisingly user-friendly. I entered the address and there it was in black and white, notice of default and election to sell under deed of trust. The property at 1247 Maple Street, owned by Robert and Linda Hendricks, was officially in foreclosure proceedings. According to the public documents, they were behind on mortgage payments for over 8 months. The initial notice of default had been filed 12 weeks ago. They had been given multiple opportunities to cure the default, all of which had passed without resolution. The property was now scheduled for public auction in exactly 37 days. The notice had been filed 2 weeks ago. Linda had posted that humiliating photo of my apartment knowing full well that her own house was about to be taken away. I sat in the cafe's back office, staring at the foreclosure document on my phone screen, and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice. This was about calling out a bully who thought she could punch down without consequences. The weight of this information felt heavy in my hands. I had real power now, the kind of power that Linda had wielded over me for years with her cutting remarks and public humiliations. But holding this knowledge also brought back a flood of memories that I tried so hard to suppress. I remember being 12 years old at Thanksgiving dinner when Linda loudly announced to the entire table that my jeans were from Walmart while her daughter Emma's were from some expensive boutique. The way she'd said it, with that fake sympathetic smile, made it clear she wasn't just making an observation, she was establishing a hierarchy. I remembered high school graduation, when instead of congratulating me on being accepted to college with a partial scholarship, Linda had made a big show of asking whether I was sure I could handle the academic rigor since my grades weren't quite impressive as Jessica's. Jessica, who had gone to a private school while I'd attended the overcrowded public high school where half the textbooks were falling apart. I remembered my 21st birthday party, which my parents threw at their modest house, and how Linda spent the entire evening talking about Emma's upcoming Sweet 16 party that was going to cost more than most people's cars. She'd made sure everyone knew the price tag, right down to the designer dress and professional photographer. And I remembered the Christmas when I was 23, when I'd proudly announced that I'd finally saved enough money to put a security deposit down on my own apartment. Instead of celebrating my independence, Linda had immediately started asking invasive questions about the neighborhood, the rent, the square footage, whether I felt safe living alone in that part of town. She'd made it sound like I was moving into a crack den instead of a perfectly respectable studio in a working-class area. Each memory stung fresh, reminding me of years of subtle put-downs and backhanded compliments that had chipped away at my confidence. Linda had spent decades positioning herself the successful sister-in-law, the one who'd married well and lived the American dream, while treating me like a cautionary tale of what happened when you didn't live up to family expectations. But now I knew the truth. Behind all that superiority and judgment, Linda and Robert had been struggling financially for the better part of a year. Their perfect life was built on missed payments and ignored legal notices. Their beautiful house was about to be taken away because they failed to address their financial problems in time. All those expensive dinners and home improvements and vacation photos had been posted while they were falling further and further behind on their most basic obligation. I thought about James, the real estate attorney, and our conversations over morning coffee. He'd mentioned that foreclosure cases often involved people who'd gotten overwhelmed by financial problems and then made things worse by avoiding the issue entirely. Denial is expensive, he'd said one morning, stirring his espresso thoughtfully. Some people would rather lose everything than face reality and ask for help. That was Linda exactly. She'd probably known for months that they were behind on payments, but instead of addressing the problem or seeking assistance, she'd kept up the facade. And worse, she continued putting other people down to make herself feel better about her own deteriorating situation. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Linda had spent years making me feel ashamed of my financial struggles, my small apartment, my secondhand furniture, my inability to afford the lifestyle that the rest of the family took for granted. She'd made me feel like a failure for working multiple jobs just to pay rent, like there was something wrong with me for not being able to afford what she considered basic necessities. But I had been honest about my situation. I'd never pretended to be something I wasn't. I'd worked hard, saved money, and slowly built a life that I could actually afford. I'd made sacrifices and gone without luxuries, but I'd never gone into debt to maintain appearances. Everything I had, I'd earned through my own labor. Linda, on the other hand, had been living a complete lie. She'd been judging me for being poor while secretly being even poorer herself, just better at hiding it behind credit and deception. I pulled out my phone and looked at the family group chat again. Linda's cruel photo was still there, along with all the laughing responses from family members who'd been quick to join in on mocking my former living situation. The casual cruelty of it still took my breath away. Then I scrolled back through months of Linda's previous posts. Photo after photo of expensive meals at trendy restaurants. Pictures of new furniture and home improvements. Vacation shots from places I could never afford to visit. Shopping hauls and designer purchases. All of it carefully curated to project an image of success and prosperity. Now I understood what I was really looking at, a desperate woman trying to convince the world, and maybe herself, that she was winning at life, even as everything fell apart behind the scenes. Each post had been a performance, a lie designed to maintain her position in the family hierarchy. But the performance had come at my expense. While Linda was posting photos of her fake perfect life, she was simultaneously putting me down for living honestly within my means. She'd used my genuine financial struggles as a punchline to deflect attention from her own much more serious financial problems. I started typing a response to her group chat message several times, then deleted it. Part of me wanted to unleash years of pent-up anger in a scathing reply that would tear apart every assumption she'd ever made about me. Part of me wanted to detail exactly how hypocritical her message was, given what I now knew about her situation. But that wouldn't accomplish anything constructive. It would just escalate the drama and make me look petty. If I was going to do this, I needed to do it right. I needed to be strategic, not emotional. I thought about my conversation with James about foreclosure proceedings being public record. Anyone could look up this information if they knew where to find it. I wasn't violating attorney-client privilege or accessing confidential information. I was simply aware of something that Linda apparently thought was secret but was actually available to anyone who cared to look. The question was whether I should use this information, and if so, how. I could send Linda a private message letting her know that I knew about the foreclosure and asking her to apologize for the group chat message. That would give her a chance to do the right thing without public embarrassment. It was probably the mature, gracious approach that would make me the bigger person. But honestly, I was tired of being the bigger person. I was tired of taking the high road while Linda felt free to take cheap shots at me in front of our entire family. I was tired of absorbing her cruelty and responding with grace while she faced no consequences for her behavior. Maybe it was time for Linda to learn what it felt like to be on the receiving end of public humiliation. Maybe she needed to understand exactly how it felt to have your private struggles exposed and mocked by people who were supposed to care about you. I looked at the foreclosure documents again, studying the details. The public records showed they were behind on payments for over 8 months before the foreclosure proceedings even started. This wasn't a recent development or a temporary setback. This was a long-term financial problem that Linda had been hiding while continuing to judge other people's financial situations. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Here was a woman who owed hundreds of thousands of dollars she couldn't pay, whose house was literally being taken away by the bank, and she thought it was appropriate to mock my modest but fully paid-for living situation. I remembered something my high school English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, used to say about bullies. Bullies pick on other people because they're insecure about themselves, she'd explained after I'd been teased for wearing the same shoes 2 days in a row. They're trying to deflect attention from their own problems by making someone else the target. Mrs. Rodriguez had been right about the school bullies, and she was right about Linda too. Every cruel comment, every backhanded compliment, every public put-down had been Linda's way of deflecting attention from her own insecurities and failures. She'd made me the family scapegoat to avoid being seen as one herself. But now the truth was out there, documented in legal papers and public records. Linda's perfect facade was crumbling whether I said anything or not. The question was whether I was going to let her continue using me as a shield to hide behind. I thought about all the times I'd stayed quiet when Linda made her cutting remarks. All the times I'd smiled politely and changed the subject when she'd made jokes about my financial situation. All the times I'd let her comment slide because I didn't want to cause family drama or make things awkward for everyone else. Where had that gotten me? It had gotten me a family that saw me as fair game for mockery. It had gotten me relatives who thought it was perfectly acceptable to laugh at my struggles while never questioning whether Linda's behavior was appropriate. It had gotten me years of feeling ashamed about circumstances that were nothing to be ashamed of. Maybe if I'd stood up to Linda years ago, she wouldn't have felt so comfortable posting that cruel photo. Maybe if there had been consequences for her behavior, she would have learned to treat people with more respect. Maybe my silence had been enabling her cruelty rather than preventing family conflict. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to center myself. This decision would have lasting consequences for family relationships. Once I crossed this line, there would be no going back. Linda would never forgive me for exposing her like this. Some family members might see me as vindictive or cruel. The family dynamics would shift permanently, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe the current family dynamics needed to be disrupted. Maybe a system that allowed Linda to punch down at me while facing no consequences wasn't worth preserving. Maybe it was time for everyone to see that actions have consequences, even within families. I pulled out my laptop and navigated to the county clerk's website where foreclosure notices were published. I wanted to double-check the information and make sure I had all the facts straight. There it was, exactly as I'd found it before: notice of default and election to sell under deed of trust for the property at 1247 Maple Street, owned by Robert and Linda Hendricks. The document was dated 12 weeks ago, which meant Linda had been dealing with this foreclosure process for nearly 3 months. She posted that humiliating photo of my apartment knowing full well that her own housing situation was far more precarious than mine had ever been. She kicked me while I was down, as she saw it, all while hiding the fact that she was about to lose everything herself. I screenshot the foreclosure notice, making sure all the identifying information was clearly visible. Then I opened the family group chat and stared at Linda's message again. The black sheep's box with 3 crying laughing emojis. So casual, so cruel, so confident that she could humiliate me without consequences. Time to find out if she was right. But I'm not cruel. I didn't want to humiliate Linda the way she'd humiliated me. I wanted her to understand exactly what she'd done and give her a chance to make it right. So I sent her a private message first. Hey Linda, saw your photo yesterday. Pretty funny stuff. Listen, I've been thinking about family dynamics lately and wondering if maybe we could have coffee sometime and clear the air. I think there might be some things we should discuss privately before they become public knowledge. Let me know if you're interested. Sarah. Her response came back within an hour. Sarah, I have no idea what you're talking about. If you can't take a harmless joke, maybe you should work on developing a sense of humor. I don't have time for coffee dates with people who create drama out of nothing. I stared at her response in disbelief. Even when given a graceful exit, even when offered a private conversation to resolve things quietly, Linda doubled down on her cruelty. She dismissed my feelings entirely and refused to acknowledge that her harmless joke had been anything but harmless. The message revealed everything I needed to know about Linda's character. She wasn't just mean-spirited, she was fundamentally incapable of self-reflection or empathy. She genuinely believed that mocking my poverty in front of our entire family was acceptable behavior, and she saw my objection to it as evidence that I was overly sensitive or dramatic. I screenshot her response and set my phone down on the desk. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear but from the kind of controlled anger that comes when someone shows you exactly who they are, and it's even worse than you expected. I thought about calling my dad to get his perspective, but I already knew what he'd say. He'd probably agree that Linda had been out of line, but he'd also encourage me to let it go and be the bigger person because family is family. He'd remind me that Linda was going through a hard time with the foreclosure and suggest that her behavior came from a place of stress rather than malice. But stress doesn't excuse cruelty. Plenty of people go through financial difficulties without feeling the need to mock and humiliate others. If anything, financial struggles should make someone more empathetic to other people's circumstances, not less. I pulled up my laptop and started researching more about foreclosure proceedings in our state. I wanted to understand exactly what Linda and Robert were facing so I could make an informed decision about how to proceed. What I found was sobering. They weren't just behind on their mortgage payments, they were in serious legal jeopardy. The foreclosure process had multiple stages, and they were already several months into it. According to the public records, they'd received the initial notice of default over 3 months ago, followed by multiple opportunities to cure the default, all of which they'd apparently ignored or been unable to satisfy. The property was scheduled for auction in 37 days. If no one bought it at auction for more than the amount owed, it would revert to the bank. Either way, Linda and Robert would be forced to move out of the house they'd lived in for over a decade, the house where they'd raised their children and hosted family gatherings and built their identity as the successful branch of the Henderson family tree. For a moment, I felt the pang of sympathy. Losing your home is traumatic, regardless of the circumstances that led to it. I could imagine how scared and desperate Linda must be feeling, watching everything she'd worked for slip away. But then I remembered her message dismissing my concerns as drama and calling her public humiliation of me a harmless joke. My sympathy evaporated. Linda had chosen to respond to her own crisis by attacking someone who'd done nothing wrong. She decided to make herself feel better by making me feel worse. I started typing a longer response to her dismissive message, then stopped. Words wouldn't accomplish anything at this point. Linda had made it clear that she wasn't interested in accountability or apology. She was going to continue treating me badly until there were consequences significant enough to make her stop. I opened the family group chat and scrolled through more of Linda's recent messages. In addition to the cruel photo of my apartment, she'd made several other subtle digs at family members over the past few months. She'd posted a photo of Emma's graduation party with a caption about investing in your children's future right after my cousin Mike had mentioned that his son was going to community college because they couldn't afford a 4-year university. She'd shared an article about the importance of financial planning immediately after my Uncle Tom had posted about picking up a second job to make ends meet. It was a pattern of behavior, not an isolated incident. Linda consistently used her perceived financial success to put other family members down, all while hiding the fact that her own financial situation was far worse than anyone she was mocking. I thought about Mike, who'd worked 2 jobs for years to support his family and had been genuinely proud when his son got accepted to community college. Linda's passive-aggressive post about investing in children's futures had clearly been designed to make him feel inadequate as a father. I thought about Uncle Tom, who was nearing retirement age and had to take on extra work when his hours got cut at his main job. He'd been embarrassed enough about the situation without Linda posting articles that implied he was financially irresponsible. And I thought about myself, working 3 jobs and living in a studio apartment, genuinely proud of my independence and self-sufficiency, only to have Linda turn my living situation into a punchline for the entire family's entertainment. Linda wasn't just a bully, she was a systematic bully who used her platform in the family to consistently tear down anyone she perceived as beneath her. She'd created an environment where mocking other people's struggles was acceptable, even encouraged, as long as you were higher up on the economic ladder. But the ladder was fake. Linda's position at the top was built on lies and credit and unsustainable debt. She'd been looking down on the rest of us from a house of cards that was already collapsing. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that exposing Linda's foreclosure wasn't just about getting back at her for the apartment photo. It was about dismantling a toxic family dynamic that had been hurting people for years. It was about showing everyone that the person they'd allowed to set the family's social hierarchy was in no position to judge anyone. But I also thought about the collateral damage. Uncle Robert would be humiliated too, and while he'd certainly enabled Linda's behavior, he might not deserve to have his financial problems exposed to the entire family. Linda's children would be affected as well, though they were all adults who could handle learning that their parents weren't as financially secure as they'd believed. Then again, Robert had contributed to my humiliation by commenting on Linda's cruel post. His response, "Looks about right for someone who thinks they're too good for family advice," had been just as mean-spirited anything Linda had said. He'd actively participated in mocking me while knowing full well that his own housing situation was far more precarious than mine. And Linda's children had laughed along with their mother's cruelty. Jessica had commented with laughing emojis. Emma had expressed shock that I'd actually lived in such a small apartment, as if my financial constraints were some kind of character flaw. Marcus had made his own joke about me still living with my parents. None of them had defended me. None of them had suggested that maybe mocking a family member's living situation was inappropriate. They'd all been happy to participate in the public humiliation as long as they weren't the target. Maybe they all needed to learn what it felt like to be on the receiving end of family judgment. Maybe this was an opportunity to reset the family dynamics and establish some ground rules about treating each other with respect. I looked at the foreclosure document one more time, studying the legal language and official stamps that made Linda's financial catastrophe official and public. This wasn't gossip or speculation, it was documented fact. Linda and Robert owed money they couldn't pay, and their house was being taken away as a result. It was also public information, available to anyone who knew where to look. I wasn't violating anyone's privacy by sharing something that was already in the public domain. I was simply making my family aware of information that was readily available if they'd bothered to search for it. But more importantly, I was calling out a hypocrite who'd spent years using her fake financial success to make other family members feel inadequate. I was showing everyone that the person who'd been judging us all was in no position to judge anyone. I opened the group chat and started typing my response, then stopped. I wanted to make sure I got the tone exactly right. This couldn't sound vindictive or mean-spirited, even though Linda's behavior had been both of those things. I needed to sound calm and factual, like I was simply sharing relevant information. I also wanted to make it clear that I wasn't celebrating Linda's misfortune or trying to kick her while she was down. I was holding her accountable for her behavior and giving the family some context for understanding why her judgment of other people's living situations might not be as valid as it appeared. After several attempts, I crafted what I thought was a perfect response. It was factual without being cruel, pointed without being vindictive, and informative without being gossipy. It would accomplish my goal of exposing Linda's hypocrisy while maintaining the moral high ground. But then I hesitated again. Once I hit send, there would be no taking it back. The family would know about Linda's foreclosure, her financial problems, and the fact that her years of superior attitude had been built on nothing but smoke and mirrors. I thought about that 12-year-old girl at Thanksgiving dinner, being humiliated about her Walmart jeans while Linda's daughter showed off her expensive boutique clothes. I thought about the high school graduate being questioned about her academic abilities while Linda basked in her older daughter's achievements. I thought about the young woman being mocked for her small apartment while Linda lived in a house she couldn't afford. That girl deserved someone to stand up for her. That graduate deserved someone to acknowledge her hard work and determination. That young woman deserved someone to recognize her independence and self-sufficiency instead of mocking her circumstances. I was the only person in a position to be that someone. I read her message 3 times, feeling my sympathy evaporate with each pass. She'd had her chance. She'd chosen to double down on cruelty instead of showing even a hint of remorse or self-reflection. That evening, I carefully photographed the foreclosure notice on my computer screen, making sure every detail was clearly visible: the case number, the property address, the amounts owed, and the timeline for action. I cropped it perfectly and opened the family group chat. For a moment, I hesitated. Once I hit send, there would be no going back. The family dynamics would shift permanently. Linda's carefully constructed image would crumble in front of everyone she'd spent years trying to impress. But then I remembered the feeling of reading her caption. The casual cruelty. The assumption that I was too weak or too poor or too insignificant to fight back. The laughter of family members who were supposed to love and support me. I typed my caption, "Speaking of housing situations, thought everyone might be interested in this recent development. Foreclosure notices are public record, by the way. Hope everything works out, Linda," smiley face emoji, and I hit send. The group chat went completely silent for exactly 14 minutes. I know because I was watching, my heart pounding as the little read notifications popped up under my message one by one. Linda was the first to respond, "Sarah, delete that message right now." But it was too late. The floodgates opened. "Jessica, wait, what? Linda, is this real?" Marcus, "Holy shit, Sarah doesn't mess around." Emma, "OMG Linda, why didn't you say anything?" Uncle Robert, "This is nobody's business. Sarah, you had no right." My dad finally spoke up, "Linda, you started this. Don't dish it out if you can't take it." The messages came fast and furious. Some family members were shocked, others were asking if Linda and Robert needed help, and a few were clearly enjoying the drama. But the most telling responses came from Linda herself. Instead of acknowledging what she'd done to me, instead of apologizing for her cruelty, she immediately went on the attack. "This is completely inappropriate. Sarah has always been jealous of our success and now she's trying to kick us while we're down. This is exactly why she doesn't fit in with this family. We're going through a temporary setback because of the economy, not because of anything we did wrong. Unlike some people, we don't air our dirty laundry for attention. I can't believe you would violate our privacy like this, Sarah. This shows exactly what kind of person you really are." Each message just proved my point more clearly. Linda couldn't even see her own hypocrisy. In her mind, photographing my apartment to mock my poverty was harmless fun, but exposing her financial problems was a vicious attack. But the family was starting to see through her deflection. Jessica, who had laughed at Linda's original photo, sent a follow-up, "Linda, I hate to say it, but Sarah has a point. That photo you posted was pretty mean-spirited." Marcus added, "Yeah, if you're going through financial problems, maybe don't make fun of other people's living situations." Even Emma, the family princess, chimed in, "This whole thing is really uncomfortable. Can we all just agree to be nicer to each other?" My dad sent me a private message, "Sarah, I should have spoken up yesterday when Linda posted that photo. I'm sorry. What you did today was harsh, but she brought it on herself." Over the next few days, the story spread beyond our immediate family. Linda had apparently been hiding their financial problems from everyone, maintaining their expensive lifestyle by running up credit card debt and taking cash advances. The foreclosure was just the tip of the iceberg. Uncle Robert's plumbing business was in serious trouble. They owed money to suppliers, contractors, and the IRS. The matching SUVs were both financed at predatory interest rates. Their perfect suburban lifestyle had been built on a foundation of debt and delusion. But here's the thing that surprised me: I didn't feel as satisfied as I thought I would. Don't get me wrong, Linda absolutely deserved to be called out for her behavior. But watching her world crumble in real time was more depressing than triumphant. The real victory came in the form of change. Linda's public humiliation forced the family to confront some uncomfortable truths about how they treated each other. The group chat became a much kinder place. People started sharing real struggles instead of just bragging about successes. Jessica reached out to apologize for laughing at Linda's photo and asked if I wanted to have lunch sometime. Marcus offered to help me with some freelance graphic design work for his insurance office. Even Emma, who was still young and self-absorbed, made an effort to include me in conversations without the usual condescending undertones. My dad started calling more often, not to lecture me about my choices but just to check in and see how I was doing. He even admitted that he was proud of how hard I'd worked to build an independent life, even if it wasn't the path he would have chosen for me. As for Linda and Robert, they ended up losing the house. They moved into a rental across town and Robert took a job working for someone else's plumbing company. Linda got a part-time job at a department store, her first job in over 15 years. The experience humbled them, but it also seemed to bring them closer together. Without the pressure of maintaining appearances, they could focus on rebuilding their actual lives instead of their image. About 6 months after the foreclosure photo incident, Linda sent me a private message. It was short and to the point: "Sarah, I owe you an apology. What I did was wrong, and I understand now why you responded the way you did. I'm sorry for the way I've treated you over the years. I hope we can start fresh." I appreciated the apology, though I noticed it came only after she'd experienced her own public humiliation and financial struggles. But people can only understand what they're capable of understanding, and sometimes they need to walk in someone else's shoes before they develop empathy. I responded, "Linda, I accept your apology. I'm sorry your family is going through a difficult time, and I hope things improve for you. Let's focus on moving forward." The family dynamics didn't change overnight, and I'll probably always be somewhat of an outsider in the Henderson clan. But the casual cruelty stopped. People started thinking twice before making jokes at someone else's expense. And when family members were struggling, they found support instead of ridicule. Looking back, I realized that Linda's cruel photo actually did me a favor. It forced me to stand up for myself in a way I'd never done before. It showed my family that the quiet girl who worked 3 jobs and lived in a studio apartment had more fight in her than they'd realized. And most importantly, it taught me that sometimes the best way to handle a bully isn't to ignore them or try to be the bigger person. Sometimes you have to show them exactly what it feels like to be on the receiving end of their cruelty. The black sheep might live in a smaller pasture, but that doesn't mean we don't have sharp teeth when we need them. These days, I'm doing much better. The graphic design work that Marcus referred to me led to other opportunities, and I've been able to build a steady freelance business while keeping my part-time job at the cafe. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood, and while it's not a suburban mansion, it's mine. The family group chat still exists, but it's become a place for sharing genuine moments instead of competitive status updates. People post photos of home-cooked meals instead of expensive restaurants, talk about everyday challenges instead of just celebrating achievements, and offer help instead of judgment when someone is struggling. Linda occasionally shares updates about her new life, usually with a tone of hard-won wisdom. She posted recently about learning to budget and finding satisfaction in simple pleasures, and for the first time, her messages felt genuine rather than performative. I won't pretend that everything is perfect now. Family relationships are complicated, and years of established patterns don't disappear overnight. But there's a new level of mutual respect that didn't exist before. People think before they speak. They consider how their words might affect others. They remember that everyone is fighting battles that aren't always visible to the outside world. And me? I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't make you vindictive or cruel, even when the method you choose isn't particularly gentle. Sometimes people need a wake-up call, and sometimes you're the only one in a position to deliver it. The black sheep doesn't always have to suffer in silence. Sometimes, the black sheep gets to show the rest of the flock what justice looks like. The foreclosure photo incident became family legend, referenced whenever someone was tempted to make a mean-spirited joke or put someone down. Remember what happened to Linda became shorthand for think before you speak. But the most satisfying part wasn't Linda's comeuppance. It was the slow, gradual shift in how my family saw me. I wasn't the failure who couldn't afford a decent apartment anymore. I was the survivor who worked multiple jobs to maintain her independence. I wasn't the black sheep who didn't fit in. I was the family member who had the courage to call out bad behavior and demand better treatment for everyone. That little studio apartment that Linda mocked so cruelly? It represented something she couldn't understand at the time: the dignity of honest work, the pride of self-sufficiency, and the strength it takes to build a life from nothing. Her foreclosure notice represented something else entirely: the hollow emptiness of a life built on appearances, debt, and putting others down to feel superior. In the end, we both learned valuable lessons. She learned empathy and humility. I learned that sometimes the best defense is a strategic offense, and that family loyalty shouldn't require accepting abuse. The group chat notification sound still makes my heart skip a beat sometimes, a leftover trauma response from that Tuesday morning when Linda decided to humiliate me for sport. But now when I hear it, it's usually someone sharing good news, asking for advice, or offering support. And occasionally, it's someone posting a photo of their modest apartment or small achievement with genuine pride, knowing they'll receive encouragement instead of mockery. The Black Sheep's box turned out to be a launching pad, not a prison. And Linda's foreclosure notice? That was just the receipt for a lesson in consequences that was long overdue. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dish served cold. Sometimes it's truth served publicly, at exactly the right temperature to burn away pretense and leave everyone with a clearer view of reality. Linda stopped laughing, all right. But eventually, she learned how to smile again, genuinely this time, without the need to put anyone else down to feel good about herself. And that, more than any revenge plot, felt like a real victory for everyone involved.